This movie is on GoalSeek, an introduction to GoalSeek. We're going to cover an example of using GoalSeek, and then we're going to sort of go behind the scenes and look at how GoalSeek finds its result by using iterative calculations. So I've got a worksheet set up with 3 input cells that have a green fill and a red font. All the rest of these cells that contain numbers on this page are calculated results. And what this is a schedule that will generate how much money you'll have if you save, in this case, $100 and get a return of 5%. And this $100 goes into your savings at the beginning of the year. So you start with $100, the 5% return yields $5. At the end of the first year, you have $105. So after the passage of a year, in column D, you'll add $100 to the $105 you now have, which you'll get 5% return on, which is $10.25. And at the end of that year, you'll have $215.25, to which you'll add another $100 to. Below that, I've got an inflation rate that exactly equals the rate of return in this case. And I've used the present value formula to discount what you would have after 10 years, which in this case is $1,320.68. The present value of that money, discounted over 10 years at 5%, is $810. I then added 5% to the balance each subsequent year to return actually where I started from, which is $1,320.68. So that the real gain, which ultimately is what we're after, is the difference between what your money is making in terms of your return minus the loss of purchasing power from inflation. In this case, the return and the inflation is the same amount, so the real gain is actually 0. We're going to use GoalSeek to play with this a little bit. So GoalSeek can be found on the Data tab in the Data Tools group by left-clicking the What If Analysis command button and left-clicking GoalSeek. The set cell is the target. We want GoalSeek to set the result that we're going to have after 10 years to, I'll just pick a number, let's say $2,000, by changing the input cell, which in this case could be either the amount of money that we're saving or the return that we're getting from that amount of money. For this example, I'm going to have Excel change the amount of money that we're saving rather than the rate of return. Generally, the amount of money that we're saving is more in our control than the rate of return. Left-clicking OK. GoalSeek has provided us with a solution. We have to save $151.44 at the beginning of each year with a 5% return in order for that money to grow to a value of $2,000. I can at this point left-click OK and accept the answer, or I could have canceled it and cell C8 would still say $100. Of course, we can get back to that by pressing Control-Z and undo the update that GoalSeek just performed. Control-Y gives us that value back. I'm going to just set that back to $100. So that's fine, but at the end of the day, what really we want is a gain in our purchasing power after 10 years. And we're going to mess with GoalSeek a little bit here because we're going to give it an impossible task. I'm going to left-click the What If Analysis command button, left-click GoalSeek, and this time the set cell is correct. The output is the real gain, and I want that to be, we'll just pick any number really, by changing the input, the amount of money that we're going to save every year. Now, we already know, since the return and the inflation rate are exactly the same, that that real gain is never going to have a value. I don't care how much money we save. That's kind of disappointing, but that's the reality of the situation. So when I left-click OK, GoalSeek tries to iterate to a solution. I'm going to left-click OK again. I'm going to Control-Z and undo that, and we're going to slow GoalSeek down a little bit. Again, we're going to set that value or have it target a value of $100 by changing the input. I'm going to left-click OK, and this time I'm going to pause it to see what GoalSeek is doing. Because what it's doing is trying to iterate to a value that will satisfy the criteria that we just set up. I can step from one value to another as GoalSeek tries to go back and forth and input values and then test that value in the formula so that it can narrow down a value that'll generate the output that we've defined, which in this case is $100 of real gain. So as I left-click step, GoalSeek is iterating a number of times that we can actually establish and set. This is the 64th iteration, the 65th iteration, the 66th iteration, and so on. And back in the advanced options, which we'll go to in a second, we have it set to have Excel iterate 100 times, and then Excel will give up after that. So I'm going to step one more time. We see 100. Step again. GoalSeek may not have found a solution. That's understandable. We've given it an impossible task, but it's done iterating. I'm going to cancel that, and we're going to go back to the advanced option settings, Alt-F-T, formulas, and there's our maximum number of iterations set to 100. If we set that to 1,000, GoalSeek would attempt to find an answer by iterating 1,000 times. I'm not going to do that because that would probably take a little bit of time. So I'm going to cancel out of that. And now I'm going to lower the inflation rate to allow a positive return on the investment so that we'll have a real gain, so that we can give GoalSeek a task that's actually possible for it to perform. I'm going to take the inflation rate down to 3%, and so that we actually have a gain. It's not much of a gain, as you see, but we're going to launch GoalSeek again. What if analysis in the data tools group, GoalSeek. We want to set this cell, the real gain, to, let's say, $1,000 by changing, instead of the amount of money that we're going to save every year, the return. What sort of rate of return do we need to generate to have $1,000 of real purchasing power gain when we're in an environment where the inflation rate is 3%? Left-clicking OK. And the answer is we need a 27% return. If anybody knows how to do that, please let me know. So that's GoalSeek. GoalSeek allows you to target an output that's generated from a series of formulas for which there is an input. It'll change that input value and iterate to the targeted output.